Welcome to Coffee and the Bull.
Hey guys, Mike and John with Coffee and the Bull. Want to thank y'all for taking a moment and listening to this episode. Go ahead, much like several of our other episodes, we're going to give a giant disclaimer right in the beginning. If you were sensitive or you don't like sensitive content, this is not going to be the episode for you. We're going to talk about some pretty dark things, and some of it might be a little graphic. Some of it may make you feel uncomfortable, but if you can bear through it, we're going to talk about some things that is pretty universal amongst I would say not even just guys, but people in general. And the goal is going to be breaking cycles, but we got to go kind of down a rabbit hole before we get to that. So.
Right. Before we jump into it, though, make sure you hit that like, follow, subscribe, and share button so that we can help not just you, but anybody you may know who's also struggling. Let's not be greedy with the content.
Right. So, like we've talked about, hey, send us an email if you got any questions or something you want to talk about, and we're going to respond to you. I want to stress that you send us an email, we're going to get back with you. We got a phone call today from a friend of mine, and he brought up, he said, I've been watching y'all's episodes. He said, I really appreciate the content. He said, but I want to bring up there's a hole in what y'all got going on. And he said, I want to make you aware of it. And he said it was that, our thing is, hey, you need to talk to somebody. Get a friend, get a family member, something like that. Somebody that you can confide in, and that will help, the mental health journey, especially for people who can't afford a therapist,
Right.
And we're not downplaying therapists. We're not saying they don't matter or they don't help. They definitely do. There's a reason they get paid the money that they get paid. There's a reason they go through the schooling they do. We've had experiences with them. Some of them have been good. Some of them have been bad.
Yep.
But I've got friends who have been going for years and they absolutely love it. They highly recommend it. However, when you can't do that, that's been our premise is, hey, get somebody, find somebody to talk to. And a friend gave us a call and he's like, look, I appreciate what y'all are doing. He's like, but he said, you've got a lot of people who don't have anybody. He said they don't have that friend who they can talk to. They don't have somebody they can confide in. They're at work. They're definitely not going to talk to their coworkers about it. About deep things. He's like, so keep in mind that's one of the battles that you've got. See if y'all can come up with a solution for it. And so that generated a phone call to John, and we kind of talked about a couple different things, and we deleted our original episode 6, just so that we could do this, because I think this is going to be a lot more valuable, and I think it's going to help a lot more people. But it's going to be sensitive. It's going to be I probably wouldn't let your kids listen to it, but that's your decision here, because the goal of this is we want to leave a legacy for our kids to not go through the battles we're going through,
and maybe understand where we come from on certain aspects,
maybe why we're grumpy sometimes, and so that's going to be the end of the disclaimer. This is going to be kind of a wild ride, So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into it. And the question is going to be, and we're going to start with John. He has got a perspective that I don't have. Okay, and what I mean by that is he's going to be referencing some stuff that happened in the when he was in the military. I was not in the military. I know a lot of our followers so far, the ones that have reached out to us, they do have military backgrounds. So this is probably going to be right up their alley. But it's not just going to be for military people.
Correct.
Like we discussed it before we get on here. That this is going to be something that that I've experienced. This is something that my friend has experienced. It's not just for military people. It's not just for first responders. This is for anybody with a heartbeat, because there are moments where you're alone, and that started with the title of today's podcast is going to be Loneliness, the Silent Killer. We let it take a hold, and today we're going to try to address that. So without further ado, Mr. John, can you take it away from here?
Yeah. So basically, the basic premise is when you're stuck with no avenues to drive down. You don't have or don't feel like you have somebody that you can discuss the problems that you're having. He's such a gentleman with this pour. It's so awkward that I love it. Like it's the perfect example of who you are. Sometimes coffee doesn't do the trick, and you need that little pep in your step. It's got to
change it up a little bit for the topics.
So basically, it goes back to our original concepts, and Mike and I have a handful of them with the basic end goal, but breaking the cycle. And I remember being 19 years old, getting ready to make my first deployment, and we were told, hey, you gotta go fill out your will, get your affairs in order. And being 19, I'm in my head, and I'm like, what do I need to get in my affairs in order? Like, I'm not even married. And I get in there, and there's some older, higher ranking guy, and he's like, hey, you got to fill out your will. I'm like, okay, what's a will? And
I got 4 of them on my truck.
right. And he's like, well, it's so that somebody can get all your property. I'm like, bro, I'm 19 years old. I just left home, not by choice, because Daddy said pay rent or get out. So that's why I'm in the military. And I'm like, bro, I own clothes. I don't own anything.
Right.
And he goes, okay, well, you also got to fill out this paperwork, who you want to get your life insurance and your body. And I'm like, wait, what are we talking about? And he goes, if you die in combat, somebody in the U.S. has to get your body, and they have to get your life insurance. So I was single. I had no kids at the time. I'm like, okay, this is too easy. I grab a phone book, and why there was an Alaska phone book in Camp Pendleton, California, I still to this day don't know. But I literally opened up a business. It was a pizzeria in Alaska. They were going to get my life insurance, and some poor dude in Alaska somewhere was getting my body. Because in my brain, the way that my father is, I was like, this dude doesn't want my body. He's not going to accept the money.
Right.
I love my father to death, but he is a firm believer. He stands on the ground that if I didn't earn it, I don't deserve it, and I don't want it. And that's how he is. So that's why I was, just I'm going to give some random dude. And in my head, I'm thinking, how funny is that going to be? When
Like a FedEx driver pulling up?
Pulling up, like, hey, we got this body in the back for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that poor dude, thank God that didn't happen. But, you cycle from that thought process, you get into country, and we were in a hot zone. I'm not going to say the winds, the wheres, and the hows, and all of that. One, because none of it's classified.
It's irrelevant.
Right, it's just irrelevant. Right. So we're in this country, and not to get into the glorification of it, because it isn't as glorified as some make it out to seem, but we're day in, day out, constant life or death situations, and not every day, as much as they say it's day in, day out. Sure, we could have got hit with a rocket in our sleep or whatever, but the reality of it is it's not what you see on TV and in the movies, but there's still that daily risk of losing your life.
Mm-hmm.
And not to take away from anybody that was there, because anybody that knows where I was and when I was there understands that concept. But you go from this 19-year-old kid who, your last concern was getting a driver's license, going to prom, and graduating high school, and now is my gun clean? Is the truck ready to go? Is all my gear and equipment ready?
Right.
Is the boss going to yell at me today? How am I going to screw up as the new guy? And you're already at a heightened level of your own anxiety. You have a no escape situation because you're in a third world country that you didn't bring yourself to, essentially. So as you're battling the day to day, and you get in your first firefighter, you get in your first explosion or IED that goes off or whatever, and you start seeing the bodies, and you start seeing the war and the ugliness that comes with it. Some of those bodies you put down, and everybody around you is cheering you on, and they're encouraging it, and they're the hooting and hollering for the F yeahs and the good jobs and the way to you got him here, or you did this or you did that. and you get this conflict inside of you because you grew up your whole life with everybody telling you don't fist fight, don't go out and make unwanted fights that you didn't have to have, and now you're in a third world country and you're slaying left and right, and everybody's cheering you on. So you're battling the good versus evil inside of you, but at the same time you can't show that because you don't want to be seen as weak. You don't want the people that depend on you and depend on you to have that backbone to keep going out day in and day out, no matter how bad it sucks. And so you compartmentalize it. You bottle it up, you put it on the shelf. And it's not like other scenarios where, in the States, you got firemen that run into the burning building and find, the deceased person, or people who happen on accidents or find a loved one, lost somewhere, where it's that one incident. In combat, we have it daily where you're constantly dealing with it, and you can't show weakness because the way that you're trained is that the minute you're weak.
When you say weakness, if I can interrupt you, what do you mean specifically by that?
So that's the outward appearance, and I don't mean physically weak.
Right.
You don't want to be the guy in the middle of a war, found in your bed crying, or missing home, or feeling like what you're doing isn't legitimate, and you're questioning your choices. Because, to be fair, we all question it. We all wanted to know why the hell we were there, to a degree. But you had this stigma, this macho mentality that you had to keep going and keep fighting, or you were weak. You weren't there to hack it. You had to be transferred. And the downfall with it is you see it.
Mm-hmm.
You see other military personnel come forward, they go to the chaplain, they go to the doctor, they go to a medic or a friend or whatever, and they start to vent that circumstance of I don't feel like this is right, or this is really bothering me, or this is really weighing on me. And next thing you know, they're on some sort of admin duty, or they're removed from that action, and everybody around you is like, oh, that guy's a bitch, he couldn't hang, or he's this and he's that, and he wasn't strong enough to be able to go in.
You got a weak heart.
Right. And so you compartmentalize it, and then you confound yourself with what I call the most powerful moment I've ever felt in my life. And part of it is a sense of accomplishment and a sense of, and forgive me, but a almost godlike feeling. And I've never compared myself to God in any other fashion, but we go into this house. It's 2:00 in the morning. It's pitch black. I make it to the third floor in the building because the doors are locked, and I've got to let an entire platoon into this building, and I'm the smallest guy, I'm the lightest guy, I'm the fastest guy. So I've got to make it up to the roof, get through three flights of stairs to open the front door to let everybody in. So being young, being new, making it up there, stepping over and around not just people but animals and obstacles and things that are going to make noise that could give you away. You have a thought in your brain that goes, one miscalculation and I could be dead. I could be fighting everyone in here by myself. You get the door open, your guys start coming in. You know, because you've already walked through the building, where the bad guy is at or where the people are at that you're trying to get to. And here I am taking a knee in another man's home where he considers his castle his safe place. He's laid down sleeping, surrounded by his family, and he's waking up to me with a gun to his forehead, basically telling him to be quiet or I'm going to kill him. We don't speak the same language, but he knows exactly what it means when there's a barrel pointed in your face, and the only thing he could do is piss himself in the bed. And for those of you that don't understand or can't grasp the concept, I have completely dominated this grown man at 19 years old in ways that he couldn't be violated by anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
There's no other semblance.
You took his safe spot away.
Right. I completely shattered everything, and not only did I do that, I did it in front of his wife, his kids, and everything, and demoralized everything about him. And so part of you is like, who's your daddy now? But then the other side of you is like, one day I could be this. One day I could be this vulnerable. And granted, I don't think about that until years later. In that moment, there's a power, a sense of just godlike. You control everything in there. And granted, I'm not, again, comparing myself to God, but you get done with all of that, and you do that day in and day out for a year. You come home, and now you're looking at your wife, your kids, and granted, I didn't have any at the time, thankfully. Years later, I did on other deployments in similar circumstances, but then you're looking at your peers. You have brand new people who need to be trained up and need to get ready to go into that same environment.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the guys that were standing shoulder to shoulder with you in those environments, and you can't open up because if you go to counseling, you go to a therapist, you go to the doctor, you go to the chaplain, you go to anybody and voice these concerns inside of you, all of a sudden you're blacklisted. There goes a promotion, there goes leadership positions, there goes any chance that you could infect the new guys,
Like the morale.
right? Because they're like, oh man, there's this guy, he's got awards for killing people, or he's got awards for gallantry and being brave and everything else, and now he's going to the chaplain, now he's going to a therapist, now he's seeing somebody or whatever. And I'll be straightforward, because of that stigma and that fear that I couldn't speak out about the things that were bothering me, that I could have easily gone to a therapist, gone to the chaplain, or talked it out and still been fine to keep going on my missions. I started drinking, and when I tell you drinking, I mean I was putting down a handle of Captain Morgan by myself a night, and to get the taste out, I would drink a 6-pack of Coors Light. Like that's where my brain was at. It was like, this is the only way I can sleep. This is the only, and
Right.
it wasn't just the dreams and what was going on in combat. It was literally just the battling the good and evil inside of my brain and trying to make sense of it all. And when you try to look at avenues that you can go, because you're literally alone, and you're spinning wheels, and everybody tells you, suck it up, drive on, suck it up, drive on. What do you do when the gas tank's empty but the gun's not?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I believe, like, the whole 22 a day thing, I think that's a joke. I think it's a sham. It's oh, we're trying to bring, don't take your life awareness, to veterans. Stop. Call them. Pick up the phone and call them. And I hate this. I hate this so much, because you see it on Facebook. Every time a veteran, takes their life, somebody wants to post, my phone's always on, call me. No, it's not. Stop saying it. Instead of waiting for them to call you, call them.
Mm-hmm.
Reach out. And we have like an unspoken kind of thing where it's like, if I catch, say, 10 o'clock in the morning, and I don't know beforehand that you have something planned or you're doing something, I'm going to text you. And it's a vice versa thing where we're not checking on each other because we're worried that the other person's going to hurt themselves. It's almost like this is unnatural.
Right.
Because we talk literally every day. And for me, I was so alone during that time, because you're so afraid of the backlash to open up and be like, I'm not okay. I'm not necessarily at the end of my rope,
Right.
but I'm not okay. Like, things
There's still an internal struggle
right.
that's going on with what you're doing.
Right. And if it had been normalized conversation where you could sit down and not just glorify the things that we had done, because that's the mentality we had, to fake courage to keep going. If you could normalize the conversation into the, are you okay? How are you dealing with that?
Right.
What's going on? You'd find that there are other people who were there or had similar circumstances or situations that could be like, hey man, I've been there. This is normal. Your feelings are normal.
Right.
In this amount of time frame for me, I was okay. Or, hey, we had different circumstances. Well, your feelings normal. I can't give you a time frame of when you are going to be okay. I can only tell you when I was okay and how I got through it. And if you, just for a trial and error, and this is just for me to ask, but if you're at that point where you're like, I don't have any friends, I don't have coworkers, I don't have people that I can rely on or trust in, trial and error. Try it out. And I get that some people have been burned by friends or family or whatever running their mouths about their personal business. It's shitty. It is. But you'll find you start to teach yourself intuitive thoughts on picking the people you divulge with.
Right.
And you and I was military, you were never military, but we both are really good at spotting a dude who says, "Oh, I was military, or I was SWAT, or I was whatever," and mentally picking them apart before we trust in them.
Right.
And asking those right questions that if what you're telling me is the truth, you'll have the right answer or damn near the right answer versus those guys where you're like, yeah, okay, assistant SWAT commander in a post academy, I believe that type of things.
Yeah. And so, like we had talked about in the beginning, I was never in the military, but much like, the rest of society, that feeling of alone, that hit me hard back in 2020. I had started my law enforcement career, in 2016.
Right.
And spent years trying to be the guy in the middle of everything. It wasn't necessarily trying to be a hero. I didn't want any of that, but I wanted to experience the job. And some of it was me wanting it. Some of it was just thrown upon me. Like we have the term shit magnet. In that line of work, and there are guys who they think they're a magnet, and then there's what I went through,
Right.
where it's just like, just you scratching your head and you're like, what is going on? Whether it be, a homicide scene or a suicide scene or just, this person's feeling this way or that way, or, it's just absolute clusters, for lack of a better term.
Right.
And it was just so concentrated in, so concentrated in a couple years that it really took a toll where I didn't know how to compartmentalize it, or correctly compartmentalize it.
Right.
And so what I did was I would absorb all these, whether it be shooting scenes or stabbing scenes or, this family gets ripped apart or that one, or, this car wreck or whatever, and they don't teach you how to deal with that. They can't. There's no way, I'm not faulting the police academies across the country for anything. They're doing what they can. They actually, despite what a lot of the media wants to portray, they do a really good job of covering as much as they possibly can. But unfortunately, there's some things, and my dad had this conversation with me the other day. There's some things in law enforcement, and even in the military that you can't be taught. You have to experience it,
Right.
and that's the only way to figure out how you're going to go about it. And so what I did was I did not compartmentalize it correctly because I didn't know how. You can't. The first time you've ever done it, you can't know what to do when it's
Right.
you're pulling a child out of a car wreck or whatever, or you're going to go pull a baby out of the woods that's been ejected from a car. There's no way to get around that.
Right.
And
Somebody has to do it.
somebody's got to do it, and
and
so what you do is you go do it, and one of the things I remember, I had a trainee at the time, and we had not to go into the details of the call, but we had to put a baby in the same body bag as his mom from a car wreck, and that weighed on me and that weighed on the trainee, and because I was so focused on myself, I didn't hey man, you okay, like this is what you need to do, like I didn't know how to train that, and so I had several years of just one incidents after the other, and I filed it away in my brain. That's what we call compartmentalization. You take
put it on the shelf.
you
feel
put it
later.
on you put it on the shelf and you deal with it later. Well, what happens is you never deal with it. Because again, much like in the military, the last thing you want to be is a cop that's going to a therapist because your shift partners are going to be like, is he crazy?
Right, and then you don't want to tell them.
Right, you don't be like, hey man, I need some help. This is what I'm struggling with, because
so
it's
then
like
guesswork
it's like,
comes out.
bro, you're struggling about a dead body. We deal with dead bodies all the time,
Right.
And that's so it was one of the things where I couldn't discuss it with anybody, and so I remember I thought I knew what feeling alone with was at that time, and it was just not you wasn't able to discuss it with anybody, but you didn't want to be looked at as weak. and all this other stuff. So it ended up with in 2020, August of 2020, Hurricane Laura hit, and I had a little construction business at the time. I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a break from law enforcement. I'm going to go rebuild houses or whatever. And it was about 3 or 4 hours up the road, or no, 4 or 5 hours up the road where we were working at. And so I drove a camper down there that I had, and we set up a base over there. And that's where I stayed. You know, I'd leave I might be going, 5, 10, 7, sometimes 2 weeks in a row. 5 or 7 days or whatever. And so it was extended periods of time being away from home.
Right.
And what that did was I thought I didn't have anybody with me when I was in law enforcement, because hey, you can't talk about it. But what I ran into was when you're the boss of the company and you got people working for you, they're not interested in what you've got going on. You can't talk to them.
Right.
They're worried about their paycheck, and that's it. Hey, how much are you going to yell at me throughout the day? And I knew that. I didn't go, hey man, you got a second? Let me run this by you. And so what I did was I would work all day, and I'd go back home or go back to the camper, take a shower, and I would sit down with whatever the whiskey flavor of or whiskey brand of that night was, and went down to where it was I would drink every night to the point that I lost feeling in my face. I was like, the moment my face is numb, I know I can sleep and I'll be good. And there was a lot of nights, and y'all can they can say what they want about it. There was a lot of nights where everything that I'd compartmentalized came back to the forefront,
Right.
because you've got to deal with it at some point. You can't just ignore it.
Because it's going to keep tapping
It's
on your
going to
shoulder.
keep tapping on your shoulders,
Yeah.
and the biggest demons that you've got are going to come knocking at the door at 2:00 in the morning.
At the worst time.
When you're trying to sleep, and then you added alcohol on top of it, where hey, you're not feeling right anyway,
Right.
and it comes up, and you start reliving all that, and you try to process it, and it really sent me down a dark hole, and so. It wasn't, never actually took any steps, towards the suicidal side of things, but I wasn't far from it. I'll just be honest with you. For
Right.
about a year, that's where I was, and didn't tell anybody. Didn't tell my dad about it. Didn't tell my wife about it. It was just, hey, suck it up. This is life. It is what it is. Stop being a bitch and go, and keep moving forward. And I remember that feeling of alone.
Right.
It was probably the worst thing I've ever felt in my life.
Now, let me ask this. Did it get worse for you? And I know you got a train of thought. Was it worse for you around other people or when you were actually alone?
For me, it was when I was actually alone.
So,
Like, I knew the people I was around when I was doing construction work. I knew that I couldn't talk to them anyway.
right.
So it wasn't, it was expected to be, to have that feeling there. But it was when I was, when all you've got going on in the background is the hum of an air conditioning unit.
Right, right.
That's where it really hit hard.
Because I felt the loneliest when I was surrounded by people pretending I was okay
Mm-hmm.
because I knew that none of them knew where I was at.
Right.
But it was the loudest when I was by myself,
Right.
usually intoxicated. That's when it was the loudest
Right.
that, hey, like always, there's nobody here for you.
Right. And so, it's it's one of them things where, you get that feeling, and there seems to be no answer for it. You don't really see a solution. You don't see, how to pull yourself out of it. And then honestly, I'll give it. It was 100% by the grace of God that that we developed the relationship that we had. It was
Yeah.
it was I think that we had a phone call at one point, and I think you were talking about something. I was like, hey, we need to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah. It was actually the agency that you had left that I was still working at, and I was at just spinning wheels. It was like I called you because you had worked there longer than I had. You had more knowledge of the people that were in places and
Mhm.
positions of being in charge, and I could not figure out what I was doing wrong.
Right.
Anybody that knows me will tell you that I have a big mouth. I'm rough around the edges, but when it comes to getting the job done, I'm the one that you want to call.
Mm-hmm.
I will do it. I will do it proudly. I will badge of honor it. And when it's said and done, you may say, well, not going to say I like the way he did it, but damn it, did he do it? And so I came to you because I was like, dude, I am crushing it. And outside of, if it ain't right, it's wrong. And I have no problem telling people my opinion unfiltered and direct to their face. Outside of that, I could not figure out why I couldn't get ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't get promoted. I couldn't get a raise. I couldn't get moved to a specialized division. And I was literally drawing a blank. And I was so upset that I was like, I'm gonna call the two guys that I know, and unfortunately the other guy was busy with work, Coop. Not that he didn't call me back, because he did,
Right.
but we had talked at that point, so I was a lot better in that moment. But that's what it was.
And I think that was the beginning stages, because we didn't come right off the bat and be like, hey man, I'm thinking about ending everything. The conversation didn't start off like that. I want to stress that, like, this is not none of this is going to be an overnight change. It's you're in the, you got to realize you're in the middle of a battle right now, with your mindset and where you're at, and it's not a quick one. It's not a 5-second fight. You're in for lack of a better term, a tour of duty on it.
Yeah. And the best way to look at it is, because you're going to have ups and downs with it. You're going to find, people that you can relate to, and then find out, short time later, hey, that's not the guy. That's
Right.
Not to be funny, your person, your guy that you can bounce your stuff off of. That's
Your friend.
your friend.
Your boyfriend.
Right. I mean, yeah. But you're not going to find that guy overnight that you can confide in like that you're going to have the people that fail, and so you got to look at it as your war and your battle. And the battle is finding the right guy for the job.
Well, and that's what we're going to get into here now is, there's this misconception, and that was kind of the conversation I had with my friend earlier, who called, hey, this is a hole that y'all have. There's this misconception that, in the military, in law enforcement, as a firefighter, whatever, there's this understood brotherhood,
Right.
And to an extent there is, it's there's something there where, and what I mean by that is, obviously, if you're experiencing the same thing with each other, you have a bond there.
Camaraderie.
Don't get me wrong, but
like, I trust you with my life, but not my wife.
Right.
Type of situation.
And so it's one of those things where there is a bond there, but at the same time, it's not one built on emotion, on true emotion.
Right.
It's built. A lot of it is built off of the fake camaraderie, the boisterous behavior.
Yeah.
Woo, and all that other stuff. They want to be there for the woo-hoo moments, but not the boo-hoo moments.
Right.
And so that's what you run into, and so there's a brotherhood there, but it's also, you're still just as alone as the guy who's not in that field.
Right.
And that's where we wanted to bring up that this isn't something that's it's just me experiencing it or you experiencing, and that it's different. You're driving home from work, and you work. Let's say you sell insurance or whatever. You're not reaching your financial goals or sales quotas for the month. You're driving home to a wife who you hate. She hates you or whatever. There's these different things that guys are going, or that you're going through, that are just one thing after the other, and they form a catalyst where you turn around and you're like, I can't tell anybody. If you're selling used cars, to make ends meet, and you walk in and you tell your sales manager, hey man, I really feel like I'm alone. I need somebody to talk to or whatever. He's going to tell you, get the hell out of his office.
Right.
And that's just how it is. Like, I've got a friend who's a doctor, and if he goes in and says, hey, tells one of his coworkers, "Hey, I'm kind of depressed right now." They're not going to have him working at the hospital,
Right.
And so that feeling of alone or that, hey, I can't talk to anybody. That's across the board, and it's one of the things. And what I wanted to bring up with whenever I was talking to my friend, we were going over different things, and I told him, I said, look, what we're trying to do is not just point out problems.
Right.
We don't want to just be like, hey, look, I'm a guy, nobody cares about my feelings, and then call it a day. Like we discussed that.
Because that's what society's been doing this whole time.
That's what
anyway.
hey, nobody cares how I feel or what I'm going through, or
Right. I'm a guy. I don't talk to anybody.
And they just leave it at that because they're trying to get sympathy likes.
Right.
Is all it is. We're trying to give some type of answer, some type of solution, or something like that. And I told him, I said, well, how many, because his thing was, and I'm still in some of his thunder. I don't think he's going to be mad at me. He will be a guest on the show at one point. But he brought up, he's like, years ago, he had a friend who he was one of his best friends. He knew he could trust this dude with everything. Life happened, and the guy and the friend moved away. And so for years he went without having that person to confide in, and me and him wound up, we ran into each other a couple years ago, really hit it off, and have been. He calls me,
This is the friend he cheats on me with.
Yeah, I cheat on John with him. This is, he's a guy, we go to church together on Sundays, and he calls me throughout the week. Hey, we'll go meet for breakfast, for coffee, and we discuss what each one of us is battling with, and it wasn't something that just happened the first time. It didn't happen, it took a while, but his thing was, he's like, I had years of nobody I could talk to. I can't just, if I'm, and I'm not saying he had these specific problems, but this was examples he gave me.
Right.
He's like, if I'm depressed or if I'm stressed out, I can't discuss that with my coworkers because absolutely not. He's like, I can't do it. Like I will not still have a job if I bring this up. And so he referenced that, and he's like, so what he did was, because he didn't have anybody, he's like, I can't talk at work. He says, not like, I've got that brotherhood that y'all have got, as cops or whatever. And I said, well, so, we addressed that a little bit, but he's like, also, I didn't have any, he's an introvert. He's like, he doesn't go looking for people. He's not going to the bar, hanging out, or he's not on, whatever these, these websites where you meet people for friendships and stuff like he doesn't do that, and so he took and he said, I focused on my family and I focused on my work. He said I made sure his wife had had what she needed. She was a stay-at-home mom. He's like, she had what she needed, so he went to work. He
drowned that depression out with
going to work.
else, yeah.
And his kids had everything they needed. He's like, he was a good dad and good husband. I'm not going to cast any shade on him, but internally he's drowning.
Right.
And
that's that male stigma.
Right.
I would rather die on my sword than let them see me fall.
So die on your horse, yeah.
Right.
And so it's one of the things where he's like, he's like, you start feeling alone, and so I brought up the point. I said, okay, so, and I preface this by saying we don't have the answers
At all.
This is just, we're two jackasses trying to figure it out, and as we try to go through it. If it helps, it helps. If it doesn't, find another podcast.
Yeah. Right. Send us an email.
Send us an email. Tell us we suck, and then leave.
Right.
Not really.
For the next
not
episode,
really. But it's I told him, I said, how many times did you go in those years? Did you go to a family reunion? And you've got whether it be your dad, your brothers, your sisters, whatever. So what y'all talk about? And I was like, I guarantee you, without being there, I can tell you how it went down. Hey, how's the kids doing? They're doing good in school? How's work going? Did you get that promotion or whatever? Everything's good between you and your wife? Yeah, great. And then you move on.
Pass the coleslaw.
Pass the coleslaw. Get you a slice of turkey and get out the house.
I hate coleslaw.
But even with family, there's never that. Hey, how are you really doing?
Right.
And then that follows up with the friends that you do have, because everybody's got some type of friend somewhere. It could be not virtual, but somebody who you link up with and play video games with. You might have never met them. Like there's people who their best friends, they've never physically met in real life.
Right.
They only
Yeah.
meet online. And it could be something like that. It could be your, for lack of a better term, your Friday night friends. Hey, we made it through the week. Let's chill out, hang out together. Don't be a downer. Don't show up and hey man, this is what I'm going through, because next Friday you're not invited. And so
That's not helping my problem.
And so his thing was, he's like you're always alone. I said, yeah, but what happens if we like our mission statement is on Facebook? What happens if we normalize having that conversation?
Right.
Where it's not uncommon to hear these different things, and that really. Give you an example. All right, when I first started, my law enforcement mentor. All right, I'm going to go ahead and allow Captain. His name is Scott, and I hopped in his unit. I was green as grass. Right, I'd never wore a duty belt, never wore a bulletproof vest, and I hopped in his unit full of I want to change the world and fight.
We're doing this.
I'm going to be the cop.
Right.
And
jaywalker going to jail.
Right. Not this is my parish.
Right,
type
right.
mindset. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't that arrogant. I knew a little bit to it, but it was. I remember hopping in his unit, and he was a retired NOPD sergeant. And so it was. He worked NOPD in the 90s. So
Right.
there's a type of cop that's in him that you don't see a lot anymore. It was and he taught me a lot of how to deal with some stressful situations, how to create some stressful situations, and some things that our supervisors may not have liked, but they didn't find out about. And so I remember, I think it was the fourth shift, we had a bomb threat called in at a high school.
Right.
And it wound up not being nothing, which a lot of times they're not. And we were parked up the road for a perimeter or something like that. And we're sitting there. I think we were there for 30 minutes or so, and he's done drank all his coffee. I done drank all my coffee. Ain't got any snacks in the unit because we hadn't stopped by the grocery store yet, or the gas station yet. He had gotten tired of hearing about how much experience I didn't have. I got tired of hearing about all the stuff he had done, and so we started talking. Or he started talking, and started telling me his life story. I didn't care. Like I'm like, we don't talk about this. Like I don't need to know about why you got divorced or why this person did you wrong or that person. And I remember it was about 30 minutes of him just giving me kind of his life story, how he got why he ended up at NOPD, why he did this, why he did that, and the different he didn't have kids, and this why he didn't have kids, and he adopted this dog while he was on duty. This dog was on the interstate. Dog's name is Bo. And
ate better than most people, from what I'm told.
Yeah, absolutely. This dog was, Scott picked this dog up on the interstate, and his words to me, he said, I needed that dog as much as that dog needed me. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, bro, I don't know you. One, you're older than me, and I'll make jokes with him. I mean, you're retired, and I'm getting into this profession, so it's one of the things where obviously we're in two different generations here. Chill out, boomer. And so it was one of the things where he starts opening up, and I realized how much more he was teaching me that I didn't even realize at the time.
Right.
Looking back on it, I see what he did. At the time, I was like, bro, shut up. Like, are you about to start crying? Like, you need a hug. Get your tissue. You got dog treats in the back of your unit. You got any napkins or whatever to wipe the tears off your eyes?
Right.
And so I remember, at that moment, I was thinking how weak he was. But he was taking and confiding in somebody who he was trying to teach, and somebody who was younger than him. But it was something that, honestly, if you could apply that concept to your life, where when somebody does start talking to you, you're not like, hey, bro, I'm not the one for that.
Right.
Take your sissy butt up the road. Talk. Go get you a therapist or whatever. Instead of doing all that. And judging guys, if we could just have that conversation and normalize that, that would go so much further. And my friend, he was like, man, he said, you're right. I agree with you, but But how do you go about that? And I don't know that I've got an answer for that part.
So this just came to me, and it's kind of a two-part, because one of them's a question, the other one's more of like a suggestion. So my suggestion is, if you're in the mind frame that, hey, I'm alone and I don't have anybody I can confide in all of my issues or all of the struggles that I've got, what if you take the initiative to call
Change it
somebody
up.
and say, hey, how you doing? And let them be, oh, I'm okay. No. What's really going on?
Yeah, how are you really doing?
Like, don't give me the bullshit answer of the wife's good, she complains from time to time, and the kids are all right, but they're tearing up the house. How are you really doing?
Well, I think a lot of times, and we discussed it a little bit in the last episode, is
Don't forget, I have a question. But go ahead.
when we call each other, it's, hey, how's the wife doing? How's the kids doing?
Right.
All right, man. Look, if you need anything, give me a shout. That is, I would say, probably 90% of guys' conversation to each other.
We don't have that conversation.
Because I don't like you.
But
it's one of them things where, how many times do you do you call your friend? Hey, how's the wife? How's the kids? Hey, how are you doing, man?
Right.
Because I had another friend. He's a younger guy. I trained him when he was getting into law enforcement, or at least with that one agency, and I called him one day, and he's sitting there telling me, and I was like, hey man, how are you doing? He goes, oh, I'm good. I said, no. How are you really doing? And it turned into, and it's going to be to the topic of another episode is he's like, man, he said, and he starts listing out all this stuff going on, and it was. He showed up for work, and they're shutting the company down. Right. So he had another week's worth of work. He had just gotten that job because another company had caused issues, and so he had an extended period of time without having a paycheck. Finally got a paycheck. Now he's losing that. He was in the middle of building a house, and permits fell through, and this got denied and that got denied, and he's running into all that. He's like, I'm leeching money everywhere I turn. Nothing's coming through. You got that turns into marital stress because your wife's she's in the same pocketbook that you're in.
Right.
And it's not that she's mad at you about it, but hey, it needs a solution. And he didn't have it.
Right.
And that turns into, hey, the kids need. I don't know where this happened. I don't remember needing this much money whenever I went to school, but it's like every time I turn around, my son needs some type of money for something. This picture, that picture,
uniforms, or
and all of a sudden, and so he's like, you got all that going on. He's got a couple kids having to do that. He's like, I just need a win, man.
Right.
And I would have never known that if I just left it. Hey, man, how's your wife? How's your kids? Oh, you doing great? Oh, hey, man, you need something? Give me a shout. All right, I'm here for you. That's what we say. I'm here for you. Just give me a shout. And we don't really go deeper because I think sometimes we don't want to. Because I think so many times we're distracted with our own loneliness.
Right.
Our own feeling of not abandonment, but just you don't see any help anywhere. You're like, I can't take on your problems because I've got my own.
But if you took that as an opportunity, like I said, you're in your own loneliness, to reach out to somebody else and let them confide in you their problems, and you're able to relate your problems with theirs.
And that's what happened with us. If we can circle back,
right.
When I was having a moment, I called you, and you were like, "Hey, man, I don't know what's the." I think the topic of conversation was, "What's the point?" When you were struggling at the agency,
right?
And and I was working in Lake Charles. I could tell in the conversation, because I remember I turned and told my wife, I said, hey, he's struggling with something. I need to take him out to lunch tomorrow. And so the next day, I come and picked you up.
Yep.
Hey, we're going to go to Texas Roadhouse. Went and got some steak. Didn't really have a conversation there. And went back home, set up, did it typical. That I've always found that sitting around a little bonfire with whether it be Red Bull, some whiskey, a beer, Coke, whatever, coffee, and a cigar, and just talking. And what happened was, or what happens when you have that type of situation, if I brought you there and I'm like, hey man, what's really going on with you? You start talking. What I'm going to do out of habit, that's just how conversations happen, is I'm going to try to relate to you
Right.
in my own life. Now, if I'm a pathological liar, I'm a piece of crap, so whatever. But assuming that we're not all pieces of crap and that we're actually genuine human beings, I'm going to start relating to you. And at the same time that you're being able to unload your stuff on me, I'm unloading on you.
Right.
And not as not just dumping it and hey, good luck to you and then roll out.
Right.
It forms that bond.
You get a give and take, and
right.
not a take relationship.
So taking that, like you said, taking that initiative and bringing it up it's honestly going to be for you just as much as it is for him.
It's for them,
right. So sorry to interrupt you.
No, and that's kind of where I was going with this is again, we don't have all the answers, and we don't have all the solutions, but we have some. We have the some that worked for us.
Right. It may not work for everybody, but it worked for us.
Right. And one of the things that popped into my head back on my 2-part thing was you realize once you've made it through the dark periods of your life, all of the bottom shitty situations, you realize there's a reason that you made it through it. Because I guarantee you, if you go back to 8-year-old me and 5-year-old Mike, because I'm older than him, if you go back to those kids and you go, hey, one day you're going to meet a dude who is probably somewhere in some shithole Alabama city, and you guys are going to become podcasters. I guarantee you both of us would have been like, what is a podcast?
Where are you getting Alabama from?
You grew up in Alabama.
I spent a couple years. We didn't meet in Alabama.
No, but you were 5. My my geographicals are correct on this. Anyway, the shit that you go through though, the dark periods, the rough times, the I'm alones, I don't see the up in this. I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel in this. What if those are life tests geared to structure you to be there for somebody else? And I know that that's almost the opposite of what we're trying to say and do here, which is help you through your dark time. What are the chances that you and I have experienced completely different lives with a happenstance, mutual career path meeting, having different viewpoints, different everything, but similar struggles? So you have that compiled list of different struggles, and now we're at that point where we're able to take those struggles and the success of getting through that to turn that around to help other people that are now going through that battle, and that one day the people that are listening, the people that are going through their struggles now that are listening to this podcast and they're relating to it, or they're saying, hey, I'm going to try that, or that's going to work for me, or whatever the case may be, later on in their life, when they're past their struggles, they're able to turn that around and go, hey, I remember this one time.
Well, I think it goes back to trying to break cycles.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, whether it be, golfing or law enforcement or doing a podcast or, cutting grass, everything that I try to do, I've got to look at it from the standpoint that I've got to teach my son how to do this.
Right.
And if I teach my son how to do everything, but I don't teach him how to live life, to be strong in life, then I'm missing the point, And so it's one of the things where I honestly believe we go through some things, through some struggles, so that we can pass those victories down to the guys that are coming up behind you.
Right.
And it's trying to break the cycles of, hey, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that got fed to us, got fed to our parents and their parents before them. Hey, you don't need anybody, you don't cry at funerals. When you look at funerals, like we've had this conversation, you look at a lot of the expectations that you have when families are at their darkest moment. The dad is supposed to be the rock. You know, he's supposed to be the one. You know, he might shed a couple tears, but you know, he's expected to. He's expected to drive the family home,
right,
and figure out how to move forward. He doesn't ever get the opportunity to mourn on his own or to show that weakness, because he's got to represent stability for the family. Right. You know, we've had that conversation where, you know, there's a TikTok video where this guy explains this therapist is saying that, you know, she interviewed this guy and he had explained that, you know, his family would his wife and daughters would rather see him die on his horse than to how did he word it? Basically, to become vulnerable. Right. You know, and unfortunately, that's true.
It is.
But there's other ways of going about vulnerability than just crashing, because that's what happens. You know, is you hang on to it, and it becomes a phone call.
Yeah.
You know, it becomes, and I'm not just talking about, you know, hey. You go down this and you become dark, you become overwhelmed, and all of a sudden you're taking and committing suicide. I'm not even going that far, but what if it's you going down, you're alone, because that's the topic of this podcast or episode. You're alone, and so rather than going home because you're like, hey, I'm alone at work, I go home, we're going to have an argument,
right?
You know, because finances aren't being met, the kids are being too loud. You're at auditory overload, you know, and the kids have the TV turned up loud, and you snap on them, so then your wife gets mad, snaps on you, and you know, you got all this going on where you just
you're having World War III in the kitchen.
Yeah, you know, and so to save money on dishes and from shattering them up against the wall,
right?
I'm gonna go to the bar for a minute. Let me go have a drink or two and chill out, and then you turn around and it's some girl at the bar gave you some attention. You know, a smile and a wink or whatever.
That endorphin capped everything.
Right, and so now you've got this guy who, you know, we see it happen over and over and over. They leave a family, you know, they got, you know, 2 or 3 kids and they've been married for 10, 15 years.
Right.
And they're walking out on their wife for some chick who is just going to be a fling, honestly, is all it's ever going to be.
Right.
And you're like, how did you self-destruct like that? Like you had a great house, you had everything together, and yeah, it could have been stressful a little bit, but I mean, come on, man, like what did you do? Right. Well, that dude was drowning. You know, that dude needed some help. He was absolutely alone. That's what drove him to that point.
Right.
I'm not justifying leaving your wife.
No, but he's got to glorify his actions now, because it's like everybody's looking at him going, you had a good wife, you have decent kids, like, you know, and half of that is the facade that he's got going, and the other half of it is, you know, this guy was just like afraid to ask for help. Right. Afraid to be, you know, vulnerable.
Rather, you know, for whatever reason, you know, whether it's he didn't have you know, somebody he could confide in or whatever. He didn't confide in somebody.
Right.
You know, and I don't know if it wasn't there.
The wrong person.
Right. You know, and so it's one of the things where if we could normalize, hey, I need some help. You know, you know, if there's you know, breaking that cycle where you get out of being alone. Hey, I need some help. Can you know can you? Hey, man, you got a minute? I need to talk to somebody. That goes a long way. A conversation goes a long way, and that's why you look at therapists. All therapists really do, and I'm not downplaying them. They have conversations. Now they have structures, and they have ways of going about it. They know what to ask. They know how to ask it, and how to dive into things. But at the end of the day, it's all like they're not beating it out of you. You're not walking into a therapist's office and they're having a baseball bat going, "Hey, today's lesson
you about to talk."
You know, it's not one of those. It's just having a conversation.
Right.
You know, and
like we've discussed with therapists, it takes you time to build that trust, and I say that you have to break the mental stereotype that if you've never been through what I've been through, you're not going to understand what I'm going through. We have to break that. And I'll be the first to say I'm guilty of it. I refuse to go see a psychologist 100%. Who's never experienced the things that I've experienced to a degree. But at the same time, it's because we're afraid of how the other person's going to perceive the information we're putting out and view us from that point forward. But at the same time, you never truly know what somebody else has been through if you don't take the first step
Right.
to break the cycle and ask the question. We're not saying that what your dad's taught you, or even your parents, about, you got to be strong, you got to be able to pick yourself up, drive forward, and everything else. Those are amazing and good qualities that you
Right.
do need
Right.
to have. But you also have to have that opportunity to break the cycle and tell somebody, I'm not okay right now. But if you're afraid to do it, ask somebody else,
Right.
and let them know that you're a safe place to open that door.
Right.
Because if you don't, we just become compartmentalized statistics later on in
Right.
life when,
Right.
when we have no avenue or right way to broach it.
Right.
So I know that Mike and I have talked about our email is open. And so if you're at a point where you're like, I don't feel normal talking to somebody,
Coffee&theBull at yahoo.com.
right, we're not going to embarrass you. We're not going to get your email. We're not going to get on here and be like, Dave69324 Kitty Cat has said, all right, we're not doing that.
Right.
All right. Now, we may pull from it. And this is just us being straightforward with everything. We may pull the details of it without giving away who you are or anything like that, because we're not those type of people. But we can also, at the same time, if you're at a point where you're like, I need help, or this is what I'm struggling with, this is what I'm going with, send the email. We will sit down together and respond back to you.
And that's like we had the conversation because it was, hey, we got a lot of people calling us on the phone, a lot of people texting us, but there's not been a lot of the people listening actually commenting.
Right.
And it's because those comments are visible.
Right,
And people don't want their personal business. So we understand you don't want to get your personal business out there. That's fine. That's not a problem.
Right.
That's what shoot us that email. We're not going to broadcast your information, and we will respond to you if it needs to be. Hey, look, we need to have a conversation. We'll do whatever we need to on our end. Like we will be. If you legitimately don't have anybody, we will be that person for you.
Right.
Got no issue with that.
That being said, not sounding boisterous, we have 216 Facebook followers. So if it takes us a minute, I just ask that you give us a little bit of time, because I'm not blowing smoke. We're not, the email's not blowing up right now. But I don't want everybody to send an email and think, okay, I got 2 seconds and they're going to shoot us back an email.
This also, if this podcast be a year from now, when they're watching it, who knows where we're at. But it's one of the things where shoot us an email. We'll be more than happy to talk to you. While you're at it, same basic podcast crap. Hit all them buttons, because you may not be alone. Let's look at it from that aspect.
Right.
You may have that person that you rely on, or your wife elbowed you, said, "Hey, you need to listen to this because you're stupid." You may not need what we've got, but I guarantee you, within 5 people that you can name, one of them is going to need it.
100%.
100%. It is definitely some information. You may not think it's good. You may not think it's helpful, but you
may think Mike's ugly.
Yeah. It's one of the things where we got to get it out there. We got to get it to got to get it to people. So hit that share button. Leave us a comment if you want to. Tell us we're doing great. Tell us we're not doing great. I don't care.
Yeah.
But if you need anything, shoot us an email. It's coffeeandthebull at yahoo.com. Unless you've got anything else.
This is not this isn't one of those things where we're pleading and begging for likes, follows, and shares.
Right.
All right. We get excited about them. I don't want anybody to be confused about it. We do get excited about it. At this point, we're not getting paid to do this. Everything we're doing is out of our own pockets and out of our own time and efforts and energy. And I want it to be very well known that our goal is to help other people. That's why we chose the path that we chose. It's why we got into the career paths that we got into, from building houses to being in the military, to being police officers. We got into those roles to help people and make the place, whether it's our own town, whether it's our own city, whether it's our own, I guess those are the same thing,
our world.
The goal was to make it better for other people. And so there's no gimmicks here. This is 100% raw, 100% us. There's, with the exception of my profanity, this is us. This is who we are, and the goal is to help. So I just want you all to know that we're coming from a place of genuine care and hope to help everybody else out. So, Mike, go ahead and do your stupid thing.
Toodaloo.
Stupid.